Thank you, thank you. You know, I want to start off by thanking all of our partners, all the people who worked with us from the federal, state, the county, and local law enforcement agencies, and including the Parole Authority. And want to recognize Councilman Polincic, who has been an advocate for this type of activity for some time, and so he's here also here today. This operation, this is the phase one of this operation. We're calling We Are Cleve. Phase one, where there have been execution of search warrants or arrest warrants, adult parole board, other kinds of things to take violent criminals off the street. And we intend to, the agencies will talk about results of what we've done, and then we're going into phase two. We're not stopping is the point. We're going to continue. But I want to make sure that I express that none of our success would be possible without the help of the community. The community has been very helpful and supportive of what we've been doing. And I also want to express to the community at large that if we just rely on law enforcement and the agency of law enforcement to solve the problems that we have around crime, particularly violent crimes, then we will not be successful. This has to be an entire community effort. Everything from the business community to the religious community, to education, to all the aspects, all the pillars of our society to ensure that that we do put those who need to be in jail, that we do arrest those who need to be arrested, but also deal with those underlying causes as to why people engage in criminal activity. So I want to turn this over to the chief, who will go into more detail. Chief? Where's Chief? Oh, here.
Right behind you. Thanks, Mayor. Good morning.
Good morning.
As the mayor stated, We Are CLE started around towards the end of April, and it was an initiative that, with a lot of urging from a lot of people in the community, as well as Councilman Polincic and others, we know we needed to kind of marshal our forces and get out there and let people know that we're still here and get bad folks off the streets. Marshal Pete Elliott from the U.S. Marshal Service here in Cleveland Northern District was basically the architect of this. Pete loaned his personnel, his space, his expertise to getting this thing off the ground and basically running with the ball on this. And that's why we're all here today, to be honest. And I want to thank Pete and the U.S. Marshals. They always do a great job for us. They're always a great partner. And whenever we call, Pete, as well as the other folks that you see here gathered, always answer that call for the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. So I want to thank them all. I think I've thanked them before, but I want to publicly thank all of our safety partners for this. To include our U.S. Attorney's Office, Attorney Justin Herdman, and our County Prosecutor's Office, Prosecutor Michael Malley and his folks. As the mayor stated, and you'll probably get a list, I'm not going to go through every agency, but our federal partners, our state partners, our local partners, our county and city partners, Chief Gonzalez is here, Sheriff Pinckney's here. I mean, they're all here because this is kind of what we do here in Cleveland. And this thing was basically put on to make sure that the bad actors out there know that we're on to you and we're going to track you down. And a big part of that tracking folks down was the execution of felony warrants, be it county warrants, some of our federal warrants out there, to get these people off our streets. And this is just phase one. We're going to continue on that. We're going to keep the pressure on folks. And I know that there have been a lot of things happening lately here in the city of Cleveland, but these guys are on it. These men and women of law enforcement and our other safety partners are on it. And we want the bad guys to know that you're not going to be able to rest. The mayor said that our community is instrumental in this, and they are, and we need to keep that up. If you have information either on a felony crime that's happened here in the city of Cleveland or a wanted individual, you can definitely call our 911 center, but we'll give you some numbers later for the U.S. Marshal Service, their tip line, for our prosecutor's office and others. Our State Highway Patrol, I can't stress enough how invaluable they've been in this initiative. and running their initiative, their details throughout the streets of the city of Cleveland. And I've had a lot of folks on both sides of this that come to me and say, hey, why are the State Patrol guys on city streets? Well, because we've asked them to be here. They're one of our strongest partners, and you know they do a great job for us. And then I've heard other folks talk about the State Patrol and say, why aren't they here more? So we get both sides of that coin, but they are a great partner. We've kind of been in this mode for probably the last 7, 8, 9 years with the State Patrol, and that relationship gets better and better each day. But I'm not going to talk a lot because there are a lot of details that I want these guys to get into. They're not going to give you every single detail, but you can see by the small display here in front of us, they've been doing a lot of hard work, and they've got a lot of dangerous ordinances off our city streets for the upcoming summer. But I'm going to bring up Commander GINGELL, who's going to talk a little bit about certain aspects of this, and then he's going to be followed by some of our other partners. But again, I can't stress enough the partnership. I can't stress enough that the Division of Police in the City of Cleveland can't do this alone, and we don't do it alone because our partners are always here. They're always itching to get into the fight, and to be honest, they're always in the fight. Whether you see them or not, whether it's at a press conference or not, they're always there. They're always out there working hard, so I want to thank them for that. So with that, I'm going to bring up Commander Gary GINGELL.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. I was going to give an overview, but I think the Chief pretty much covered it. He covered all our partners. The initial mission here, and again, I will mention Pete Elliott did get this rolling with Councilman Palencic, but the initial mission here was to address the wanted violent suspects, the people that are already wanted for a violent crime that for some reason or other were still running the streets. And I believe the U.S. Marshal will give you the stats on that, and they're incredible. But the other issue here was gun violence in Cleveland or any of the surrounding cities that directly affected us. So if there was somebody that was wanted in Cleveland and he was somewhere else, the marshals went and got him, or if it was a parole situation, we went and got him. But the second part of it was saturation patrols, the districts, and OSP. And then ATF was another component. They brought in the tech side of it, researching the gun origination, and also tying these guns to other crimes. As we know, we have serial shooters, so to speak, out there, and they're involved in a shooting here and they're involved in a shooting there. Well, ATF helps us bring all that together. And the goals were to remove the violent offenders with these various partners. And one of the components that I'm going to get into is our RAVEN, repeat and violent offender enforcement. And what that's about is there are a lot of parolees that are released for violent crimes. They do their time, they come back out. And the stats show that I think normally, and I think Steve will back me up on this from APA, your normal parole violator is probably below 20%, right around 20% for recommitting a crime. But a violent offender gets out and it's more like 60%. So we decided to target these folks, excuse me, with the FBI Violent Crime Task Force, Gang Impact Unit, Adult Parole, CMHA. And they formed a team, about 7 or 8 guys, depends on the day. But the most important component there is the APA, the parole officer. They go out as a team. They've got a list of all these violent people. I'm talking aggravated robbery, shootings, rapes. These are the guys they go visit. And what we found out of 57 visits is 18 were arrested with guns or dope and violated, and then 10 others were violated because they were violating parole in another manner. So half of the people that we visited, these violent offenders, were taken off the streets, and you know, some of them are going to go back to prison, some of them are going to just have their parole violation time that they got to serve. But the main mission there was to target these parole offenders. But as it developed, we realized we reached out to homicide, to sex crimes, to the districts and said, hey, if you have a parolee that you want, or if you have a parolee that's a person of interest, call Sergeant Putnam. He runs our gang impact side of this thing. And they'll get out there and they'll visit him real quick. And if he's got a warrant, and that happened in a couple of cases, sex crimes called, there's a parolee I think it was ag robbery, and he had a fresh rape, so they went out and grabbed him pretty quick. Another one that was on parole for the rape of a child, and they visited him, and he in fact was in violation, and he was actually in the company of some smaller children. So the effects that they have here is not just, you know, gun violence, it's some of the other violence that's taking place in our cities here. But to give you an idea of some of the other ones that they did, there was a gentleman from the 2nd District who had shot somebody in the face with a shotgun, and he was on parole, and they went out to do the visit on him and caught him with a gun. They got 3 in a car, all on parole, and 2 weapons in the car. You know, aggravated robbery, heartless felon gang member, arrested him with what we call a cop killer gun. It's a 7.62, which is a rifle round, but it's shot out of a pistol. Very dangerous, go right through officers' vests, very dangerous for us and anybody. Violent bank takeover suspect that they were walking into the banks with guns and doing takeovers pretty much. And they went out and investigated that and grabbed those guys. So they're kind of a versatile group. They're not the fugitive unit for sure, that is Pete's Venue. But with the parolee stuff going on and the fact that, you know, so many of these guys recommit, it's in our best interest to keep an eye on them, a closer eye. So that's what I have today for that. It's called Raven, and it's been very successful.
Okay, this
Jen?
one will go into our partner agency speakers. So from the Adult Parole Authority, Regional Administrator Steve Whitmer.
Thank you. As Gary pointed out, my name is Steve Whitmer. I'm the Regional Administrator of the Cleveland office of the Ohio Adult Parole Authority. And for those of you not familiar with us, we are a division of the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, and we're the entity responsible for supervising those offenders released from Ohio's prison system onto parole or post-release control. The Cleveland region covers Cuyahoga, Lorain, Medina, and Erie counties, and we currently supervise over 6,000 offenders. So I think it's an important thing that I want to point out is we actually have a very small percentage of our offenders that are involved in violent crime, gun violence, and gang violence. But when you have a total of 6,000 offenders, a small percentage is still a significant number. When the Operation CLE came up, we got together and came up with a plan on how we wanted to approach this. So what we decided to do was get a list of all the offenders that we have that live in the 2nd, 4th, and 5th District that are on supervision for an offense of violence with a gun specification, and preferably those that are gang affiliated. When I sent their request into my Bureau of Research, they sent me back an Excel spreadsheet with 1,100 offenders on that list. We then went through that 1,100 and weeded out all those guys that are doing well. They report, they have a stable residence, they have a job, and there's no problem, and we scratched 600 guys off of that. So the final list was about a little over 500. Going through that, we separated those 500 into different targets, soft targets and hard targets. Soft targets are the guys that are on supervision for these demographics but are doing relatively well and not in violation of their supervision. So what I had was parole officers go out and do the same thing they do every day, conduct 2-man teams. They go out and do routine home visits, knock and outs, administrative inspections of the home. During this time period, we did 92 soft targets and found little or no violation behavior with those. The individuals that Commander GINGELL is referring to are the hard targets. The hard targets are guys that are on supervision for offenses of violence with a gun spec and gang affiliated, but that are also have warrants out for their arrest for a parole violation, warrants for other crimes, or the parole officer has reason to believe that they're in violation of their conditions of supervision by using drugs, selling guns, being involved in gun violence or gang violence. So those hard targets were referred to the Raven group. In that we had the parole officers, the Cleveland Police Gang Impact Unit, FBI Violent Crime Task Force, and the ATF. And that Violent Crime Task Force also includes CMHA Police and the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department. As Commander GINGELL pointed out, I think they did 57 home visits on these hard targets. We arrested 23 offenders on supervision, and obviously a number of them with guns. Some of those guys will be sent back to prison on a parole violation. I think we've already had 8 of those indicted by Justin Herdman's office at the U.S. Attorney's Office for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Others will be facing some local charges. So all in all, just been a great collaborative effort. Now we're trying to pitch in, do our part to try and curb the gun and gang violence in the city of Cleveland, and hope things worked out for it. So thank you.
From Ohio State Highway Patrol, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin TEAFORD.
Good morning. First of all, Mayor Jackson, Chief Williams and Marshal Elliott, thank you for the partnerships that we've shared and created over the last several years. We're delighted to be here today and participate in this program. The Ohio State Highway Patrol has an unwavering commitment to promoting traffic safety, reducing crashes, and removing the criminal elements from our roadways. We know criminals use our roadways to engage in their activities, and state troopers are in a perfect position to deter crime while promoting traffic safety. Through partnerships and collaborations with our state, local, and federal partners, the patrol can aid in the betterment of our communities and continue to make Ohio a safer place to live and work. Over the course of this operation, state troopers have removed 25 illegal weapons, including automatic assault rifles and semi-automatic pistols, seized over 21,000 grams of illegal narcotics, including heroin, cocaine, crack, marijuana, and other prescription pills, and recovered 6 stolen vehicles. State troopers also initiated 148 criminal investigations, resulting in 73 felony arrests, and arrested 45 persons on outstanding warrants. In addition to our troopers conducted over 1,000 traffic stops during this time, resulting in the removal of 31 drunk or drugged drivers from the roadways. Troopers issued over 340 seatbelt citations and stopped to assist motorists over 50 times. In total, more than half of the traffic stops conducted by troopers resulted in traffic safety warnings with no citations issued. I would like to recognize the tireless efforts and professionalism of our troopers who represented the patrol during this detail. I would also like to thank Captain Chris Zerker, our Cleveland District Commander, and his staff for coordinating the patrol's involvement. The cooperation and collaboration with our law enforcement partners in the Cleveland area is the model for the rest of the state. Finally, thank you to our headquarters components from the Office of Field Operations and Office of Criminal Investigations for their efforts and support to make this combined detail a shared success. Thank you.
From the DEA Special Agent in Charge, Tim Plancon.
Thank you. Thank you to the Chief, Mayor, Pete Elliott. I'd especially like to thank all of the law enforcement, the people out there in the field that executed and the search warrants, and the work that they do is dangerous. And I'm glad that everybody came home safe. And so some of them are in here and nearby, so I'd like to personally thank them. It's a tough job, and I'm glad you're doing it, so thank you. Just wanted to kind of brief you a little bit on the drug seizures that were done by the DEA and our partners throughout this operation so far. 60 kilograms of cocaine, 4.7 kilograms of heroin, 100 grams of fentanyl, carfentanil heroin mix, which is extremely dangerous, 4.4 pounds of methamphetamine. There were 1,500 counterfeit Percocet pills that were seized that look exactly like Percocet, but they actually turned out to be fentanyl. Another kilogram of synthetic cathinone, 5 pounds of marijuana. There's little over $271,000 seized during this operation, 7 firearms, and 30 arrests by the DEA groups and our partners in this effort. In addition to the drugs seized, we also identified several dealers of fentanyl and other opioids that are responsible for scores of overdoses in Northeast Ohio. DEA agents have arrested some of those dealers and are in the process of preparing charges against them. Obviously, one of our main focuses will be identifying where they got the drugs and seeing if we can further these cases and disrupt the supply chain. Thank you.
United States Marshal Peter Elliott.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the chief and the leadership of Cleveland and all the districts, commanders also, and the mayor for heading this up and leading this. I also want to thank, people have given me credit, but Mike Polensic's the one that made the call on this originally and said enough is enough. I want things changed in my neighborhood. And that's when we all got together. And at the end of the day, we know we're strong in law enforcement when we're focused together as one. As Tim said, I want to thank all the officers that are actually out there on the streets, all those FBI agents and DEA agents and ATF and deputy marshals, all the police officers and state troopers and parole agents and sheriffs and so on, that work 12-hour days and sacrifice for their families. We did receive funding in this operation from Washington. We were able to bring in law enforcement officers from Canton and Akron and Toledo and Youngstown that participated in that. That's local police officers and federal officers from all those departments, and I also want to thank them for their participation. And again, our strengths are in our partnerships together. Again, focus is everything in law enforcement, and this, as you heard, was only round one. This is going to be a 12-round fight, and at the end of the day, I promise you that we and the good citizens of Cleveland are going to be the ones standing. Thank you.
Close, United States Attorney Justin Bergman.
Thank you. Good morning. I also want to start off by thanking all the agencies that were involved in this effort, and to extend specific thanks to our Marshal Pete Elliott and to Chief Williams. Their leadership on this initiative was really second to none, and is responsible for bringing together all of these folks that you see in front of you. And I also want to thank those agencies as well, all of our local, state, and federal partners who lent support and contributed to this initiative, and again, it's continued support. It's not over. We know that most of our violent crime is committed by a small group of people in our neighborhoods, and we also know that strategic surgical policing and prosecution of those people, most of whom are already prohibited from possessing firearms, that is the most effective tool that we can use in law enforcement to drive down homicides. And we've looked at the data associated with this operation, and it bears out that theory. We have academic partners who are assigned to our Northern Ohio Violent Crimes Consortium. They've been able to review some of the initial and preliminary violent crime data associated with this initiative, and I could say that the results are significant. For example, during the operation in the months of April and May, weapons arrests in the 4th District alone were up 175%. Over the same period from the previous year. And it's not a coincidence that associated with that uptick in firearms arrests, homicides across the city were down 20% in that same time period, and homicides in the 4th and 5th districts were down 37%. So this operation is about identifying and targeting those people who have proven themselves to be violent. Our office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, has increased the number of violent crime prosecutions. Just this year alone, we're up over 50%. Most of those are contributed to, been contributed from our Cleveland law enforcement partners. And we're going to continue to work with Mayor Jackson, with our Chief of Police, with our federal partners, and with our County Prosecutor, Mike O'Malley, to ensure that those people who fit federal prosecution guidelines are prosecuted federally. And for those who are prosecuted by our office, that's going to mean significant terms of imprisonment in a federal facility, and it's going to be outside of Ohio. But this initiative, is, as you heard, is about more than just seizing firearms. You heard from Tim Planson about the fantastic job that the DEA has done in reducing the supply of drugs in our pipeline, and the focused efforts that they engaged in. And again, even that effort was about using intelligence-driven policing to identify worthy targets of prosecution. As you heard, we've already filed some federal firearms indictments from our office, and we will continue to do that. Our intake process is ongoing. And ultimately, the message, I think, that this is directed at two primary audiences. The first is the community and the residents of Cleveland. These folks that are up here, we are behind you. We've got your back, and we're looking out for you. And the second audience is for those people who are seeking to engage in violent crime on our streets. The same team is here to put you away, to take your guns, and to ensure that you don't do any further harm to this great city that we all stand for. And ultimately, what we hope to see is an additional and continued effort to make streets of this great city safe. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I have a quick question if I can. So we mentioned that the start of this effort was late April. How long did this initiative last?
We started in April, I think it was mid-April, and we just ended the first phase here about 2 weeks ago. The second phase has already started. Round number 2 is already underway.
And do you know how much additional money was spent on manpower during that time?
Well, I want to thank my Washington office for that, and I don't have the exact number, but we called up and they provided that support and it paid for overtime and for our law enforcement officers from all those different cities to be up here in Cleveland working.
And can you tell me, do you have an estimate about how many officers were just involved in the entire initiative?
I don't. I can just talk on my task force. We have 350 men and women across the district, and I'm sure ATF, DEA, FBI has, and APA, troopers, lots, so
Hundreds of
hundreds,
officers?
hundreds and hundreds of officers.
You said 12 rounds. How long will that take?
We're not going to tell you that, so just know that we're going to be there. We're going to be in the community. Again, you know, you have a city that cares. You have councilmen that cares. You have a mayor that cares. You have a chief that cares, and so on. So we're going to be here as long as they need us.
I think a lot of people probably assume you guys were all working together already. So what's different about this project?
Focused effort. At the end of the day, we did something similar in Youngstown in 2004, which is very successful, and over the years, along with the U.S. Attorney, we have done similar things like this. It's more focus, more manpower, and I'll tell you what made, in my mind, made a tremendous amount of difference are the state troopers. We've never had that much focus ever from the State Patrol. They were out there every single day, making a tremendous difference.
You mentioned some of the stats from the 4th and 5th. I mean, can you talk about the whole city? Has it made that kind of an impact?
Well, I think when you clear any one area, it makes a difference in another area, but the chief can speak on that. I do believe it is making a difference. Again, we're going to be here. I'm going to tell you where we're going to be, but we're going to be out there in force, and we'll continue to make a difference.
Councilman Pelisic, this has obviously been something that's been very near and dear to you. Can you kind of talk about what it took to get everyone to the table and work together?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the mayor and the chief for really getting behind and getting, really leading the charge here. I approached the U.S. Marshals sometime early last year about what I thought to be a much bigger problem than just basic street crime. And I want to thank Pete Elliott, U.S. Marshal. I want to thank Justin Herman, the U.S. Attorney, who both of them took the time to come out in the neighborhood and ride around. Sheriff Pinckney, Cuyahoga Prosecutor Mike O'Malley, all the participants here, because as you've heard, it was a team effort. And it was, again, just not dealing with what we all believe to be basic street crime. It was much bigger than that. So again, it was a team effort, and I applaud all the players involved in this, and I look forward to working with them as they expand this program throughout the city. As you heard from the mayor, and you're going to hear from other people, a neighborhood is only as good as the people in it. And I can't stress enough about people getting engaged. If you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. Get involved. We need to take back our community. But this effort was, and again, as has been indicated, the Ohio Highway Patrol, their effort, I can't say enough about what they've been doing. So again, look at all these folks around this table, around this room. I mean, what a job. And again, I want to thank Pete Elliott and the U.S. Attorney for being the spearhead on this. And again, and for the mayor and the chief for really taking a leadership role here and moving this forward. And so I'm expecting it to be expanded throughout the entire city. So I'm glad to have been a part of it. Thank you.
Have you been able to, you and your councilman, have you and your residents noticed a significant difference in crime?
We're starting to see it already, and I think the work. I've been getting these calls. Well, what's the Ohio Highway Patrol doing here, and what's all this beefed up and these folks, in the neighborhood? People who care about the neighborhoods see it, and those who don't care about our communities and don't respect our communities, hopefully will fear it. Thank you.
Hey, just to wrap this up, I just want to make a couple points here. We do this all the time. What you see here is just, our efforts on steroids. I mean, we have officers throughout all the agencies represented here on task force operations, on joint operations, day in and day out here in the city of Cleveland. The difference here is that, like Marshal Elliott says, this is focused, ramped up deterrence here in the city of Cleveland. And we've done that occasionally here in the city, but this time, like the Marshal said, you know, hundreds of officers from all over the state assigned to U.S. Marshal task forces, you know, our trooper partners coming in, additional officers from all the districts that are represented. And we didn't just concentrate on 3 districts, 3 parts of the city. This is a citywide initiative because our guys travel from east to west on a daily basis. And what phase 2 is going to do is ramp that up even more with more partners coming in on this, and also with more resources from the Division of Police and also some of our other partners that are involved in this. So I just wanted to make it clear that, you know, this initiative, a great initiative, but the people you see standing here work together hand in hand all the time, every day. It's not just a one-time thing. So I want to thank you guys for coming, and I want the citizens of this city to know that, you know, like the Marshal said, the people that you see behind me, the people in this room, we're behind the city of Cleveland. Thank you.